Hey, Steve from Groovy Woods. Yeah, I promised a couple videos and here we are. So it's been like 8 or 9 days and everybody in the shop has been like ridiculously sick. Good news is every single one of us tested negative for COVID. So at least our health is pretty decent, but we're getting things back into shape. We did a bunch of work in the studio today. But I kept coming back to this question. People kept asking me, what's the greatest year in music? If you've ever seen a documentary, 1971, maybe you know the answer to that. If you haven't yet, I'm going to give you a few minutes of what that's about. To me, certainly 1971 is the greatest year in music. If you go back to earlier in the year, I did a happy birthday to Carole King's Tapestry, and we did a little special commentary on that album, let alone a couple of the consoles that we had. It didn't clue me in yet, and then just literally last month in November did I do the happy anniversary to Led Zeppelin for the Zozo album, the one with Stairway to Heaven. And again, that's from 1971. That was 50 years old just a couple months ago. And those are bookends of a momentous year, and I'll have to tell you why that is. Some might think that in 1971, I was 11, and my father for Christmas bought me a trombone. And maybe that's why, although I'm not really sure if I'm ready to play this yet for you. In fact, no, we'll do it another day. But in 1971, I was 11, my father bought me a trombone. I was playing, and out of all my worldly possessions, I still have my trombone. 1971, I kept poking around in the studio over the last few days, and sure, we've all seen the Led Zeppelin album, but let's also take a look at Jethro Tull. Aqualung came out in 1971. Oh my God, monster. Don McLean, American Pie. You may or may not have been into the folk song side of things, but sure enough, that was 1971. Great bit of Grand Funk Railroad came out in 1971, but wait, America came out with the very first album. Now, I still have a beef with America because they never named that horse. They still have a horse with no name, but I'll still give them props because this was a great album release. Paul McCartney came out with Ram. So the Beatles were officially broken up by 1971, and there were quite a few solo albums that we'll talk about in a second. And of course, Elvis with his release of a Christmas album, but even Elvis was still relevant in 1971. And I think as I go down the list of a few things that were going on in 1971, if you were to take a look at everything released as an album and you gave it 1 to 10 points, 10 being for something really awesome, 1 for being, well, thank you for playing along and putting out an album, and you started tabulating that, and you just compared year to year just based upon releases alone, 1971 is a landslide winner. But you can have a lot of bias into what you want to call a scale of 1 to 10. Do I give Zeppelin 4, 10? Absolutely. Do I give Ram a 10? Maybe I give it an 8 or so. Maybe it grows on me as time goes on. Elvis Christmas album, I'm probably giving it a 9. So as I go across the whole spreadsheet, it's a great year. But I also will say probably the biggest thing I like about 1971 is the diversity. It's not just rock and roll. It's not just folk songs. It's still Elvis is relevant. The Beach Boys are relevant. The Beatles are semi-relevant, not as a group anymore, but now as solo artists. But you also look at Motown, what was going on in 1971 with Motown. Earth, Wind and Fire, Marvin Gaye, oh my God. I'm gonna go down this list, and I'm gonna go down the list pretty quickly, and I would say to you to go down that list, look it up online and let 1971 take you away. But we just finished up 2021, which is the 50th anniversary of 1971, and that was just an amazing year. I don't think we'll ever have a year like that again. So who came out with what? 1971, we had Elvis Presley with his Elvis Country, I'm 10,000 Years Old. Uriah Heep came out with Salisbury, Chicago 3. Janis Joplin with Pearl. ZZ Top's first album. The Fifth Dimension, talk about another genre, Crossing Lines In. Carly Simon's very first album was in 1971. Of course, we talked about Carole King and Tapestry, and what a monster album that is then and today. You know, the Yes album launched 1971. Miles Davis with his Jack Johnson album. Neil Young with Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse came out. Earth, Wind and Fire with their first album. Kool and the Gang live in the Sex Machine. We're just talking January and February releases so far. Look at the diversity of what was hitting. Alice Cooper, Love It to Death. James Taylor, you know, crooner. Jethro Tull with Aqualung that I showed you. Leonard Cohen, Songs of Love and Hate. Boz Gags, Humble Pie with Peter Frampton as rock line. And Mott the Hoople, that rounds out March. For crying out loud, I'm only going down like every 10th album or so. But the thing to get is not just how great these albums were in 1971 and their staying power over the years, it's the diversity and the difference between the music. In April, you had Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young with Four-Way Street. Isley Brothers giving it back. Elton John did a live bootleg album. He finally got tired of everyone doing these tape recordings, and so he just launched it. The Jackson 5 are now relative in 1971 with Maybe Tomorrow. Little Stevie Wonder, Where I'm Coming From, 1971. Grand Funk Railroad, Survival. The Doors with L.A. Woman. The Doors with L.A. Woman, that's just a monster album. The Temptations, talk about the difference just in that month alone between what are the genres that are coming up and blowing up. And you have the Rolling Stones graduating from that bebop 1965 era with Sticky Fingers. Huge, huge. Ready for another genre, I think? The Doobie Brothers with their very first album. Thin Lizzy, Gary Wright, James Gang with the Thirds, War, Jerry Reed is still relevant. Leon Russell with Leon Russell and the Shelter People, very still relevant. The Carpenters' first album. Where do they even fit? They're not rock and roll, they're not Motown, they're somewhere in between. They're definitely pop of the times. Paul McCartney and Linda come out with Ram that I just showed you. So their very first album coming from the Beatles breakup. And it was a monster hit. Marvin Gaye with What's Going On. Need I say more? I can go on and on. I'll probably have to do a Marvin Gaye segment. Rod Stewart, Every Picture Tells a Story. Monster album from him leaving Faces. Bo Diddley, Bill Withers, Just As I Am. Johnny Winter comes out with a killer live album. And I'm sparing you most of all the different live albums, but every now and then one is momentous. Johnny Cash, Man in Black. Johnny Cash, where does that fit? Steve Winwood with his Winwood compilation. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Tarkus. Is that who I've got up here? No, I've got works on the wall. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, 1971. Oh my God. Elvis Presley with his Love Letters albums. The Osmonds, I don't care whether you love them or hate them, but boy, they're out and they're still relevant. 1971, Joni Mitchell. The Byrds, Todd Rundgren, Supertramp. Blood, Sweat and Tears with Blood, Sweat and Tears #4. Rare Earth. Oh look, the Supremes with Touch. Talk about the clash of the Titans with all this different kind of music. We will never be here again. We haven't been there in 50 years. Herbie Mann with Push Push. The Allman Brothers, live at the Fillmore East. You want to talk about a killer live album, that's one of the top 5. Diana Ross with Surrender. Here you go, Black Sabbath, Master of Reality. What is more heavy metal than that? The Moody Blues, Every Good Boy Deserves Favor. Yeah, if I have nothing but Spectrum here. Joan Baez with Blessed. Deep Purple with Fireball. The Shy Lights. Helen Reddy. Isaac Hayes was Shaft soundtrack. Oh my God. And the Sha Na Na still showing what greasers are like in 1971. Mothers of Invention with the Fillmore East 1971 album. Al Green. The Who. The Who's next? 1971. Smokey Robinson and A Miracle with 1,000 Roses. Oh my God. Beach Boys still doing it up in 1971 with Surf's Up. Oh, guess who had their first album in 1971? Barbra Streisand. Fleetwood Mac with Future Games. John Lennon from the Beatles comes out with Imagine and immediately shows his genius there again. People were questioning it, and if you go back and you watch this Let It Be documentary that came out, you begin to wonder, where was John Lennon's head in 1968, 69? 1971, he blows us all away with Imagine. The Band comes out with Cahoots. The Jackson 5 with another album, going back to Indiana. Three Dog Night with Harmony. Jefferson Airplane with Bark. Charles Daniels comes up with his first album, Charles Daniels. Cher hits it, Without Sonny. Gypsy Tramps and Thieves. James Gang, Uriah Heep with another album. Steve Miller Band hits it with an album. Oh, guess who comes out with an album called Santana? Yeah, Santana did that. Golden Earrings, Seven Tears, Anne Murray. The Bee Gees are still playing. Monster album, you ready? On October 1st, Cat Stevens with Teaser and the Fire Cat. Monster album, go back and listen to that sometime. Jade Giles Band is still hitting it with The Morning After. Frank Zappa with 200 Motels. The Hollies are still relevant. The Doors come up with their second album. Showed you Elvis Presley's Christmas album. Don McLean, American Pie. Chicago at Carnegie Hall Live. Jeff Beck Group, Live and Ready. This is a monster one that really kind of was the gateway to, what's this with the Prism? Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd Metal came out in 1971. And if it wasn't for Metal, we wouldn't have Dark Side of the Moon. The success of Metal International was just absolutely insane. Little Richard comes out with the King of Rock and Roll because he didn't want anybody to forget in 1971 who started this madness. Kool and the Gang, Live at PJ's. REO Speedwagon comes out with their first album, REO Speedwagon. Curtis Mayfield's hitting it with The Roots. Van Morrison with Tupelo Honey. Hello? Now we're into November. We still have 2 more months to go. Billy Joel hits it, Cold Spring Harbor. Elton John comes with Madman Across the Water. And that definitely springboarded him into some serious fame. Billy Preston, I Wrote a Simple Song. Now I'm going to call Billy Preston the 5th Beatle. If you watch Let It Be, you'll know why. I think we talked enough about Led Zeppelin 4, but there it is in November. Oh my God. The monster of just the bookends of what's going on in 1971. Genesis with Nursery Crime, The Birds Farther Along, Miles Davis with Lie the Evil. Sly and the Family Stone, there's a riot going on right here. Kinks are still relevant, yes, with Fragile. Their second album, Yes, Fragile. Beautiful album. Alice Cooper with Killer, his second album. Carly Simon with the Heinz Ketchup Anticipation album. As long as I live, I'm going to remember Anticipation being the Heinz Ketchup song. Isaac Hayes with Black Moses. I'm going to talk about genres being thrown at us left and right from all corners. 1971 is this beautiful year with diversity and variety and intensity. These aren't just little lightweight ballad albums. Bonnie Raitt's first album. Mott the Hoople with their 3rd album of the year, Brain Capers. Grand Funk Railroad with P. Pluribus Funk. Mountain Flower of Evil, Steppenwolf for Ladies Only. Olivia Newton-John comes up with their first album, Traffic, The Low Spark of High-Heeled Boys. Classic. Still got 2 pages left. And again, I'm only reading like 1 out of every 10. Nazareth with their first. Earth, Wind and Fire comes up with another one, Need of Love, Rita Coolidge. Ike and Tina Turner, Enough Said, Mamas and the Papas. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Pictures at an Exhibition. Now they're really strutting their stuff. In December, we see ELO coming out with their first one, Electric Light Orchestra. Oh my God. We're not done. It's 1971. This is like a decade's worth of music, all in 1 year. King Crimson, Paul McCartney and Wings, second album, Wildlife. Badfinger with Straight Up. Oh, here he is, finally. He's been waiting all year, but he's been touring with Mott the Hoople, but David Bowie comes up with Hunky Dory and again shows, well, he's a chameleon every other year or so. George Harrison and Friends, they do the concert for Bangladesh, and it's probably the greatest live album, certainly by 1971, but if you look at all time, that's in the top 2 or 3 on everyone's list. I don't do too many compilation best of hits, but the Rolling Stones Hot Rock, 64 to 71 came out, and it's an insanely great compilation. The Jackson 5 comes up with their greatest hits. America comes up with their very first album called America, and I already talked enough about them and their horse. Boss Gags comes up with his first 2 albums. The Supremes and the Four Tops with Dynamite. Redbone, Carole King with her second album, Music. It's an insane year, 1971. And I'm sorry if your favorite 1971s aren't on that list, but I think I kind of talked about everything with a score of 7 and above out of 10. Those are my albums there. Go back and look at the other years and see how you think you can process that. But 1971, 50 years ago, I don't think we're ever going to see that kind of diversity ever again. We're going to see some classic